It is 6 o'clock. It is Wednesday, and we are the POP Baking Club. The POP is the practice of pastry, and we are seeking to build a strong practice in the kitchen, to think ahead, to consider the ingredients, and to move forward with intention. That's what we're going to do. My name is Kathleen. I am a certified executive pastry chef, and I teach on social media. I teach here on TikTok live every Wednesday. Then I come back for a follow-up office hours on Saturdays at noon. And then I have a Substack, a YouTube, and I think that's it. So tonight we're doing a ginger molasses cookie, and it is an incredible recipe, and I developed it with the help of former students. Basically, we get a recipe that we like, but then everyone says, I want more of this, I want less of that. And then we pool as many recipes as we can find. Everybody does one, they convert them. And then at the end of the class period, we would taste them, take notes, and then we would sort of hone in on it. And during this week of investigation, I have looked at 5 different cookies, and I have been comparing all of them, and I can see what we did and why we did it. And it's very interesting, and I hope to share all of that learning with you tonight. So this is a lecture demonstration. I will be demonstrating how to make this ginger molasses cookie. And then I'll be talking about things like ingredient function, how I mix it, how to bake it, and anything I can think of to let you know about this recipe. But the key to how I teach is to talk about bigger concepts so that you can apply them in your home and in your kitchen to every recipe that you do, whether it's from scaling before you begin, reading through the recipe and diagramming it out. That way you can move through the recipe and get a lot more out of it and have a lot more success, because we want people to have the ability to look at a recipe critically and pick good ones so that there's less waste, fewer mistakes, less frustration, and we have more ease in the kitchen. All right, let's get started. The recipe is on my link tree, as always, and it looks like this. It has the ingredients in the order in which we are going to add them. It has the standard recipe, which is huge. It's a 20-quart mixer recipe because we developed it for a commercial setting. But in the middle here, I brought it down to 750 grams. And I brought all 5 of my recipes down to 750 grams so that I could get 6 green number 12 Vollrath scoops. But what is a good byproduct of bringing it to the same yield every single time is that when I compared 5 recipes, they started to look different. Some yield more dough because they have more air in them. Some are soft, some are dry. And this was all very interesting information, and it helps formulate my opinion. Plus, I made a bunch of guesses and thought about how are things going to turn out for these different recipes, some of which I've never made. And then finally, something I find really important is the baker's percentage. And baker's percentage is based on flour, and the flour is always 100%. And I'm actually going to be talking about the baker's percentage tonight because it's really important in this recipe. So if you can print this out or bring it up on your device, pay attention to the baker's percentage column. This is my baker's percentage for the 5 cookies that I tested. And you can see where some recipes don't have ingredients. These are all butter, and one of them had shortening. So that alone is interesting. And so the gray parts are where there are no ingredients in that recipe. But then when you start comparing one recipe to the other and you get a certain result, you start to internalize what it means to have certain percentages. For instance, in ours tonight, it has 4.52% baking soda, and that is almost double any of the other recipes I tried. So think about things like that. Try to make some predictions about how this cookie is going to turn out. I post my recipes on Sunday nights so that you can get ahead of it. You can read through it. I only put instructions that say creaming method. So when you come to the live, you get to get the lecture and get all of the information and take notes or do whatever you want to. And then on Substack, I post notes. And these notes go from the history of the cookie into ingredient function, and then I do a thing called ingredient synergy, which is how in this recipe do these ingredients react to one another? Why are they paired the way that they are? Because ingredients do certain things, Butter has certain properties, water, proteins, fat, but when it's in conjunction with other ingredients and when it's treated a certain way, at a certain temperature, for a certain amount of time, it'll do different things. All right, so I would have, if I were you, access to the recipe, and I am going to begin with the ingredients, like we always do. And I took a 20-quart recipe and brought it down to 750 grams. A standard recipe can be anywhere from 2.5 pounds to 4 pounds. And I noticed when I was converting 5 ginger molasses cookies that they all were sort of foundationally built around the egg. So either they had 1 egg or 2, and then from there they built and added the flour, the leavener, the really important ingredients, the sugars and the molasses. So what ends up happening is you end up with a really big recipe sometimes and a much smaller one other times. And I like to bring them all to 750 grams for consistency across all formats. But what makes this a little challenging, and it's 100% challenging if you don't have a mini digital scale, is that these spices that I am using are in little itty bitty amounts. So you will need, and I mean 2.2 grams, 1.5 grams, 0.7 grams. And a mini digital scale will do that. This is my mini digital. It's $9.99 on Amazon, and it's a jewelry scale. And without it, you cannot do this recipe because those amounts are so small. So a spicy ginger cookie is an American derivative of what began a long time ago, centuries ago, when people had access to molasses and to ginger and to flour. They would make ginger snaps, a crunchy version, and gingerbreads that didn't have leaveners, but were intended to last a long time. You could put them in a bag, take them on a trip, and they are dry and they will last a long time. The Dutch and the English started making ginger breads and brought it to the United States. During the 1800s and early part of the 19th century, Americans became interested in smaller desserts and kind of invented the cookie. And Americans have a culture of cookie eating and we love it. So they took what were the attributes and the flavor of the very ginger forward and the molasses, but they softened it with butter and a leavener. And then certainly in the mid 20th century, when baking soda was readily available, this became the standard cookie. And it's soft and chewy. It has a molasses flavor. It's not always strongly spiced, but it's ginger forward. So any other spices that support the ginger are added as a preference, and they should be added to complement and to warm. So we have in this recipe ginger, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, cardamom, and black pepper that is ground fresh. And when we developed this recipe, it was to really make it spicy. So this is a spicy ginger cookie, which is what I call it. And it also has vanilla in it to warm it up. Vanilla can sometimes subdue flavor, so you won't find it often in a ginger cookie, but it's in here to help round out all the spices. So if we go through our ingredients, what I do is scale all of my ingredients into deli cups. And I label them so that I can double check my work. When I make labels, that's one pass through. When I put them on the lids and I begin to scale, that's another way to verify my work. And then right now, as I go through the recipe, I am going to double check and verify, and I am using the middle column. That is our yield conversion for the night. So we have 103 grams of butter, it's unsalted, always room temperature. Brown sugar at 187 grams, and there is no sucrose in this cookie. No table sugar. Molasses is at 63 grams. This is the molasses. This is unsulfured. Don't use blackstrap. It's too bitter, too powerful. Regular molasses is slightly sweet, and so this is what I'm using. I love molasses. The vanilla is at 2.9 grams. Just a very little bit. I'm using vanilla bean paste. You can use extract or vanilla bean paste. and 41 grams of egg. The recipe calls for 40.5. I naturally scale up, so I always do, so it's always consistent. So I have 41 grams of whole eggs, which I stir together and then scale. That's how I get 41 grams. I don't crack it in and stir it and take things out. Let's see. Next comes our all-purpose flour at 252 grams. It's all-purpose flour. I use King Arthur, which is 11.7 grams of protein. That's the protein content. Then we have baking soda. Just baking soda, no baking powder. Some of these recipes do have baking powder, but this one just has baking soda, and it is 11.4 grams. Then we have salt. They all don't have salt either. Salt is really nice in this recipe and helps tie together the flavors and enhances them and balances out all the spices. And then we get into the spices, which is a lot. The largest quantity of spice is going to be your ginger. Ground ginger at 5.7 grams, and that's because it's a ginger cookie, so we want the ginger flavor to be forward. And then our ground cinnamon is at 2.2 grams. Nutmeg is 1.5, and we all know nutmeg is a very pungent spice, so 1.5 grams. And one of the things with this scaling that's really important is when you look at the amounts and then you compare them to the percentages, you can see a physical representation of those percentages. Baker's percentage is not something you have to do on your own. You can go to the Practice of Pastry and use the formulator and see. It will do the math for you. And those percentages don't change even when we change the yield. They stay the same. And so I am looking at physically what these ingredients look like relative to one another, but I'm also able to give a very specific number. And in the case of the nutmeg, it's 0.6%. It's a very small percentage. Then we have cloves at 0.7 grams. And all of these spices, even though they're close in weight, and as you begin to pull them out of their jars or pouches, you can see some are lightweight and some are dense and heavy. Cinnamon happens to be very volatile. It's oily and it's heavier. So sometimes you'll have way more of something, even if it's a lower amount in grams, and that's interesting. Then we have cardamom at 0.8. Cardamom's a wonderful spice, love it. And then I have 0.9 grams of pepper, and I cracked it. And we like really big cracked pepper in general on our savory foods, but for the cookie, I would grind it relatively fine. And that way you don't get just one piece here and there, you get a better dispersion. And then we have candied or crystallized ginger. And you can buy nibs or you can cut them up. Ginger that's crystallized is not all the same. If you are at a store and it has a couple choices where they have it like spicy or hot, you can control the heat in ginger. Ginger has a trigeminal effect, which is like mint or cinnamon or peppermint. It has a physical feeling in your mouth, and so the ginger has heat, it has spice, so you can control that. So this is a spicy cookie, and if you don't like really spicy, you can either omit some of these spices or you can take down the heat on the ginger. And if you take out all the spices and just use ginger, it will not affect the overall texture of the cookie. It's not going to foundationally change the recipe. It will just change the flavor. So that's important to know. All right, so I'm gonna keep my parchment here because I sift on it. And I chopped most of my ginger, but I'll be chopping a little bit of it to show you how I do it. And we will start by, let's see, we've got all our ingredients. I always move things around depending on how I'm going to use them. I'm gonna use my handy dandy Tinker Bunka cleaver, but I use a mixer for this. If you don't have a mixer, this is a recipe you can use a hand mixer for. I don't think you can do it by hand. It ends up being relatively dry compared to other cookies. So I'm gonna start with moving the fat, which is butter in this case, and the sugar, which in this case is just the brown sugar, over here, because I'm going to start by creaming those two. The creaming method is incorporating on medium your fats and sugars. so that you are getting air into the fat and creating air cells. These air cells can be controlled. So if you go too fast, too long, or not enough, it's going to affect how many air cells end up being filled with CO2 in the oven. And the more air cells you have, the more spread you'll have, and the fewer you have, the tighter your cookie will be. So it is something you have to give consideration to. And I will start with getting these going. And I always take my ingredient labels, and I don't get rid of them because I make mistakes a lot, and I just put them off to the side. And it could happen that you forgot a spice, even though you did all these checks and balances, and you can go back and look at your labels and find out that you did, and it's over there on a shelf. So that's another way to check your work and to keep things moving in a positive direction. I don't like to and don't recommend that you scale out your brown sugar any more than the night before. It will dry out unless it's in an airtight container, but even the air gap in your container can cause it to dry out. It's not really a problem if you scale it the day before and you use it today. But what happens sometimes is people do it and then they get distracted by life and then it sits there for 2 or 3 days. Even if it doesn't feel hard, if there are any little dried bits in there and they are in your butter, you will not be able to get them out, especially if you add the sugar too fast and as you're mixing, you see those chunks, you won't get them out. First, we're gonna start by getting the butter going. And what I mean by that is we are going to put it on the paddle on low. I don't add anything all at once, and I like to start the butter so that I can get it moving and softened up a little bit. It doesn't need to be a long time, just enough to sort of determine how cold, how firm your butter is, and to get eyes on the situation. And then I add a little bit of the sugar at a time, and that way, if you just add a little bit to start, the brown sugar will incorporate without any chunks, and then you can add more. And I do a lot of things in thirds so that it becomes a routine, because when you know that everything should be added in threes or slowly, you will have a better combined mix at every stage of the game. You will never have to go back and see an unemulsified, lumpy mixture that you can't get back, because when the volume gets too high, you can't smooth that stuff out. That could be your butter, could be too firm and have chunks, your sugar could have chunks, or you could add all the liquids, it's all a mess, and then you go adding all of the dries, and then you don't have a cohesive dough. And the reason you need a cohesive dough is because all of these ingredients need to be incorporated in a way that spreads them out. The fat is a conduit for flavor, and it's going to hold all of the spices and kind of amplify them. So we need everything to be mixed in really well, because then those spices get dispersed and they get incorporated at a level that won't happen if you just add it all at the end. The next thing that you add in this cookie, and it's a little different than other creaming methods because it's the fat and the sugar, and then once that's got some air in it, we add liquids all together at the front of it, and then the dries at the end. There's no real going back and forth, and that's another reason why adding things in thirds helps get it cohesive. So I have my molasses, my vanilla, and my egg. I'm going to add the vanilla first because it's a small amount and it's flavor, and I want that to be first in the bowl, touching the fat. I want that to be the first thing. And as soon as I open this container, the smell hit me. Molasses is so good, so flavorful. So today my kitchen is cold, and you can tell when a kitchen is cold because the butter just stays on the paddle. And in fact, toward the center there are pieces and it's yellower. As you paddle your butter, it becomes lighter in color. It gets whiter because it's being oxygenated. That's what we're doing. When you add air cells, you are adding oxygen, and oxygen lightens things. So when directions say to cream butter until it's light and fluffy, it's incorporating air in a way that expands the butter, holds the sugars, because this sugar really has large grains, and those grains are going to cut through the fat. and make the air holes. And you don't create any air holes after the bowl. Any air hole that is living inside your cookie is going to be created on the paddle, on the mixer. You can't create or add any air cells later. So I am going to add a little bit of the brown sugar. And even though I just scaled it today, there are some tiny, tiny lumps. But as soon as they're mostly mixed in, I'll add another third. And brown sugar has 3 to 5% molasses, and that's important for a lot of reasons. Molasses isn't just about color or flavor, it's about the fact that it's an invert sugar. Invert sugars soften. They add moisture and also help retain the moisture. So every single one of these sucrose particles is covered with molasses, and this molasses is also bringing acidity, which we need for the baking soda. So here's what I want to tell you about this. I'm going to show you what's going on in the bowl. Usually I use a torch to warm up my butter, but because of the high volume of liquids, we don't need to do that, because as soon as I add the liquids, it's going to loosen up. So I don't need to warm up my butter. It's going to loosen up because of the liquid. So a lot of people ask me about the amounts of ingredients and being concerned that they're so small, that how do you get them all into here, because you've scaled them out, aren't you losing? That's all considered when people formulate their recipes. So the vanilla I am going to take and just put onto the paddle, scrape the paddle, and then scrape the bottom. It's better to scrape occasionally than to run the mixer on high, because when you whip things on high, you aren't in control of the air cells. You get a lot of different size air cells. And we'd rather go low and slow and develop even air cells that create stability. All right, so I'm gonna put the eggs in this over there. And then we have to sift the ingredients. I like to sift them for many reasons. Things settle, baking soda gets lumpy, and when I talk about cohesion and incorporation and disbursement, sifting is the first step in achieving that goal. So we definitely want to start the process of getting all of these spices mixed in. So this is my Tammy, my sifter. I'm actually going to add the molasses next. And I like to stop the mixer because this molasses comes out slow like molasses. That's why they say that. So if you were to do this with the machine on, it would kind of fly all over the edges of the bowl. And you don't lose it, but it does end up around the top part of the bowl. And so we want everything to be down in the batter. Sometimes with syrups like honey and glucose syrup and things like this, if you want to pop it in the microwave for 5 seconds, it will definitely loosen it up and make it come out of your container much more readily. And you really do want to make sure you get as much out of here as you can. And it is sticky and it's thick. So taking your time is imperative, and also there's no risk at this point of going too long or too slow or overdoing anything, because there's no flour in here. So there's nothing to overdo or overmix. And then before I start the mixer again, I am going to give it a quick scrape. Because scraping is mixing. It is incorporating. All right. So then we'll get that loose. I'll show it to you, and it's so pretty. But I want to get started on the dries. So we're going to do flour, salt, and baking soda goes into the Tammy first. I use kosher salt. You can use any kind of salt that you like. I do like sea salt, and a fine salt is perfectly fine, but you have to do it by weight. Then they're equal. This kosher salt has a larger grain, which actually dissolves very well. Let me get these off of here and we'll take a look at the bowl. There's a lot of ingredients. anytime there's a lot of ingredients, there can be chaos and you can forget something. So that is why it's nice to use the labels, use the system. These spices are, you know what, some of them are from Barrel and Burlap, which is a nice spice company, and they do a lot of limited edition and collabs with chefs. See how grainy it is? Normally this would just be powdery, but when you get something that's kind of extra special, it gives you more flavor and it looks different, it behaves different. Let me show you what's going on in here before I add the egg. So you can see it's lightening up. The molasses is imparting a color. It's finding its way up the sides of the bowl, and it is a little cold, but I'm not going to torch it. When I add the egg, it's going to loosen up even more. And the reason we scale is because this is not very much egg, so it's really important that we get the right amount. So I'm going to give it a quick scrape. You can tell it's already, when it falls off the paddle like that from gravity, that means it's softened up and it's lightened up. And that's important to know, because sometimes if you're making a chocolate chip cookie and the butter isn't getting soft, you do need to warm the bowl. If you don't have a torch, you can use a warm towel, but I get my torch from the hardware store. They aren't expensive and they are indispensable. So I am going to put all of the egg in because it's a small amount. If it were more, if I had 3 eggs, let's say, I would add the equivalent of 1 at a time. Let it catch up. Let me get back one of my things here. I'm gonna put my spatula on it. I wanna show you what something looks like. This is when it's not emulsified yet. That is an unemulsified batter. You can see the egg. I need to slow it down. So I'm gonna scrape it and just keep it on low. Emulsifiers help everything come together, and in our egg yolk we have natural lecithin, which helps emulsify this part. You know, fat doesn't always accept liquids and water, so that's why you have to go slow, but it helps when you have things like egg yolks, because the molecules that live in lecithin and in emulsifiers attract water and fat, so that helps. Let me scrape it and I'll keep going and I'll sift my dries. It's getting a lot lighter and bigger. So it's increasing in volume, which means it's gaining air cells and it's looking good. I like the texture. It smells great. I can't wait to get the spices in. So I'm going to keep that on low while I do my spices. Good spices will leave things on your deli cup. The volatile oils that live in good spices is where the flavor is. They're delicate. Volatile means they don't last a long time. So if you expose them to air, they will dry out. Good spices last 3 to 6 months in a jar. Airtight, and the jar should be somewhat opaque or dark. These are ground spices. Fresh spices that are whole, like nutmeg. You want to grind those at the very last minute. These spices have a wetness and oiliness to them. That means they're fresh. And if they're not fresh, you're not going to get the great flavor. So I have the mixer on low, and really it's not aerating a ton because I'm kind of babysitting. It's just kind of on hold. When you want to slow down your mixing, slow down the aeration, give yourself a minute to do a different job, you can turn your mixer down to whatever speed is no longer doing a lot of incorporating of air. Now, this is left in my tammy. I don't want to lose all my spices, but I'll show you. I know that that is just the pepper and the larger grains of spice, so I'm not concerned that I dumped it out of my tammy. And I looked, and I used a spatula to make sure that I get everything, okay? So let me scrape it a little bit, and then I'm gonna cut my ginger nibs and let this sit a second. I'm not going to add the flour yet. Normally, I would get all of the ginger nibs ready in advance, but I want to show you how I cut them real quick. All right. Now this smells good already because of the molasses, but when the spices go in it, it's really going to be amplified. so I'm just gonna put this down. Actually, I'm gonna keep it going because I want a little more air. So I'm gonna move my flours out of the way. I sifted them on a parchment. This parchment becomes my way of getting the dries into my bowl. This is off and tilting it is on. And I also reuse the parchment, which is handy. So here are my ginger nibs. And these crystallized ginger nibs from the Spice House are little. And this is where the original recipe came from. But if you don't have ginger nibs or these itty bitty ones, then you have to cut your own. And ginger, candied ginger comes in squares and cubes, and it comes like this. And I got these at the grocery store, and they actually have really good flavor. So I'm just going to do the 3 strips that I left. Because they're long, I'm going to make matchsticks, and then I'm going to dice those really small. Make it really quick and easy. I tend to get a little obsessive over the size of things, and the best you can be is to try to get them all in even size. These are sort of like adding a chocolate chip to a cookie. They add flavor and texture, but they also create a feel when you bite into them that, you know, is different than if you didn't have them. And they are optional. You do not need to use them. And in fact, this and the Spice House recipe are the only 2 of the 5 that I tested that have the ginger nibs. And they're also different in terms of which spices they include as well. I just want a really small dice. There we go. And I weighed these out whole, and then I just chop them. So they're not going to change the weight when they've been chopped. Okay, so here are my ginger nibs. Some are darker than others. And there are people out there that candy their own. That would be amazing. All right, now we're ready to go. Bring these over here, bring my dries. We are going to scrape, and then I am going to put the machine back on medium. I'm going to show you what's going on, and then we're going to add the dry ingredients that I've sifted in 3s. Scrape, scrape. You want to make sure that the bottom is really clean, and for this cookie in particular, I'm not saying it's dry, but compared to a lot of recipes, it's a drier dough, and you will definitely find that things stick to the bottom. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this up a little bit to medium. I'll let you take a look, and then we're going to add the dries. Here we go. If you were to see dark edges or dark parts, those are parts that have not been incorporated. So you want to make sure that everything is cohesive before you add the dries. Low and slow in everything that you do is going to help with a better outcome. When you scrape and when you do things like what I'm doing and you take your time, and it doesn't matter how many times you stop the paddle. If you want to stop and look and scrape, you aren't hurting anything at this stage. So it's obviously on the sides of the bowl, so I'm going to clean it up and take a look at the bottom, and then I'm going to add the first third of the dries. Now this is a very heavy. Brown sugar is a little bit heavier than sucrose. Molasses is heavy. It's not milk. It's got a viscosity that's heavier. So we need lift. And the baking soda gives us that lift, and that high percentage at 4.5% is going to help with the lift, because in the oven, the acid is hitting the baking soda and causing a reaction, and we need it to start to grow. But before we put these in the oven, we're going to roll them in sucrose, and that is going to pull a little bit of moisture toward the outside shell of the cookie, and that heat and expansion on the inside is going to push out so quickly that it's going to crackle the outside, and that's how you get the crackle crust that is a feature of a molasses ginger cookie. All right. When you're adding thirds, I will say that the first third is usually the biggest. You want your last one to be the least amount. So it is approximately a third. We're doing it in 3s. I need to clean. I lost a little bit of my powder, my dry. That's So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So you can see a lot of dry parts. It's already dry, so I'm going to scrape it and add the second one, and then I'll show you again. So we scrape. I guess you wouldn't call it a dry dough, you would call it a stiff dough. And then sometimes the flour sticks to, it's on top of the paddle, so you want to get it in. And then I will drop all this in because flour is everywhere and it's obviously not incorporated. I don't need to bring this to 100% incorporation because at this point I could overwork the flour. And one of the reasons we're using all-purpose and not bread flour or cake flour is because we need structure, but not too much. And we need it to hold together, that's the structure. But if we used bread flour, that would be too much. And if we used cake flour, it wouldn't be enough. So it's just the right amount for all of these ingredients. And that's where the synergy comes in. And all-purpose is just the name that King Arthur gives this flour. If you live in an area where you either don't, it's not called all-purpose or you don't know, all you have to do is find out what the percentage of the flour is, and then you're in business. So if you can get it around 11%, that's good. I want to show you what happens. This is picking up pretty well. There is still flour on the edges. We'll have our final inclusion. This cookie is quite fast. So you can see that there's some flour on the paddle and around the edge of the bowl. And on the bottom, it's actually got decent pickup, but I'm gonna make sure to take some extra care scraping that bottom part out. In fact, that's not going anywhere. So I can take this and scrape all that flour in to the dough and scrape up that button at the bottom. And you can see how the dough is not wet. All right, so this, I'm gonna just mix it a minute and then I'll add the rest of the flour and I'll be done. This is the last inclusion. All right, so it's gotten a lot drier. You can see it's a lot crumblier. I want to show you if I can get it to clear the bottom. This is the last time. So you can see how the flour is at the bottom. So I'm going to have to clean that out, and there's still a little bit on here, but I don't want to overwork it, so I'm going to use my spatula. So this cookie stays soft because of the ingredients, but also it stays moist for 3 to 5 days if covered properly because of the molasses, the brown sugar. Those are the defining, I think, ingredients in terms of keeping the cookie softer and longer lasting. Anytime you add an invert sugar like honey or maple syrup, corn syrup, if you've ever noticed your cookie is a lot softer, that is exactly what molasses is. And it's really sticking to the bottom. And I really don't want to start scooping this cookie and find out that there is a lot of dry, crumbly stuff to the bottom. Should be the final mix. And there should be pickup. Whatever the dough is doing should pick up what is remaining on the edge of the bowl and on the bottom. All right, that's good. That's all I need to do. So I'm going to clean off the paddle and then I am going to fold the nibs in. And you can see that this is a drier dough. So it comes off pretty nicely and pretty clean. It's not sticky. Some recipes are sticky. This one isn't. It's a little bit dry. This over here. Let's get rid of the mixer. I'm going to put these in the bowl and fold them in. And I want good dispersion with these as well. You don't want to be scooping and find out that everything on the bottom is devoid of the ginger nibs. So a little elbow grease and verify. It's really hard to overmix things when you're doing it by hand, so don't worry about that. And I am pressing it and spreading it just a little bit to get them moved around. It's a stiff dough. All right. So I use my green nightly cookie scoop to make the cookie that is in the refrigerator that I will be baking, but I would like to use these for my cookie box. And so when I do a cookie box, I don't make large cookies. I do smaller cookies and then give more of them. That way people can have little petit four sample size for their treats during the holidays. I'm going to use a 1/4 sheet tray to put these cookies onto, and these will go in the refrigerator. And then after 36 hours, I am going to put them in the freezer, and I will pull them out of the freezer when I am ready to bake them for my cookie box. And I can do that the night before, the morning of, and because they stay moist, you have a little built-in room, which is nice. I'm gonna pull all of my ingredients. And while I don't encourage eating raw eggs or raw dough, it is important that you test just a tiny bit, just in case you made a mistake. The salt is swapped with the sugar or something. It's not to see if it's good, it's to see if you've made a mistake. And it tastes great. So here's what I need to decide. I have a box of scoops. I like Vollrath. I think it's a good brand. These kinds of scoops can last in a commercial setting when you're making 500 cookies every day with this or more. They'll last 20 years. So I really recommend the Vollrath brand. They are color-coded, but they also have numbers. And these numbers tell you how many scoops you get out of a certain batch. But I never really use that. I kind of eyeball it. So this is too big for this is a giant cookie. The gray scoop is typically what people call a bakery cookie. This is typically what you'll see in a bakery setting. And it's a big cookie. It's a nice big cookie. We use the green because it's in between. Because if we're going to have a nightly cookie, we don't want it to be gigantic. Now this is a decidedly right-handed tool. People who are left-handed can use these, but it is challenging. So if you are left-handed, you want to look for this kind of scoop that gives you the ability to just do this. These are tiny. I use these for making truffles and things like that. So I'm going to look for my little guys, and then I'm just going to decide. So I've already decided I don't want the blue. It's too big. And I guess I want to know if I want to use the red or the black. And I know these are going to spread a little bit, so I'm going to go with the black. That's going to be my holiday box cookie scoop size. So you can go to Vollrath. They have a chart, and they will tell you how many ounces this is, what the number is. Okay, so I'm going to put these back. Here's my black scoop. And once I scoop with the black scoop and I get a yield, how many do I get? I'm going to write it on my notes. When you scoop, you don't want to just take dough off the top, and you do not want to scoop in the middle of your dough. You want to take the dough up the side of the bowl so that you are running that dough into the scoop. It sort of rolls and fills it up. The reason you do that is because you want consistency. Every cookie should weigh the same. And you don't need to weigh out your cookies and handle them. When people weigh out their cookies and then roll them, that's way too much handling. And I don't even think they look good. And people often say, how do you get the crinkly top? Well, you get it from proper scooping and from a good chill and a proper bake, but it starts with the scooping. And you can see the cracks. That's the beginning of getting a really good looking cookie. And you put these close together because I'm not baking them this way. They're going to be in the refrigerator for a couple of days. If you are testing recipes, you can bake one cookie right out of the bowl, and then I bake the rest at 24 hours, 36, 48, 72, and then I take the last cookie, I put it in the freezer, and when it's frozen, I bake it from frozen. That way I can determine which amount of time is good for this specific formula, because not every cookie, not every formula needs exactly the same amount of time. They are all recommendations, and some chocolate chip cookies are best at 24 hours, and others are really best at 72. Okay. You can see how this is really hard work in a commercial setting. You leave with sore hands, that's for sure. So I take my spatula, because I have about that much left, and I clean it up. And if you have a little extra left over, you can make an extra cookie if you want. I don't add it to the cookies that I already have here, because when you bake them, you now have different weights. You have different sizes that are going to bake differently. So I would rather just take that extra and bake it off as a fun little mini cookie than try to add it to all the others, because then you're throwing the whole system off. Okay, that's it. Pretty clean. That goes in there. The spatula's done. It's all done. So I'm going to put these in the refrigerator, and you guys are going to come with me. And then we are going to bring, I'm going to show you how to prepare them. It's spicy. Hilarious. I think I got some pepper. I'm going to show you how to prepare them for the oven. So let's go put these in the fridge. So I will wrap these in a little while. But in here I have all the cookies I was working on today. This is a sheeted gingerbread. This is one gingerbread, and then this is the one that we are going to be doing right now. I have 3 different recipes on here. Meanwhile, I want to check the temperature in the oven. I have an oven thermometer, and it says 350. And I want to start this cookie out definitely at 350. These are heavy. So I wrap them with what's called a bun bag. This is a half-sheet bun bag. You can get them online. You can inside them out, reuse them as long as you're not cross-contaminating or doing anything that would hurt someone with an allergy. And I just reuse these until they tear, get a hole in them, or get dirty. It's a half-sheet bun bag. So on here I have the POP ginger molasses cookie we just made. This is the OG from Spice House. And then this is another recipe from the same chefs that developed the 6th Street, and it does not have ginger nibs. So they all look very similar, but I think up close you can even see textural differences. And that comes down to aeration, ingredients, and what else would affect it? A lot of things, I guess, right? And then here is the fun part. So if you are making these, and even in a commercial setting, you could have 5 trays of these, pull them out of the freezer, let them slack, but you don't add the sugar until right before you bake them, because sugar is hygroscopic. So if you added the sugar and then put them in the refrigerator, the sugar would dissolve because it would be absorbing the moisture and pulling it from the cookie. So you do it right before it goes in the oven. For a while I was using raw sugar. I thought it added a nice crunch, but with more research and time, and over the years, I've discovered that sucrose is great because it's fine grain, really does give a nice even coating, so that when the moisture exchange, the heat expansion, when all of the chemistry takes place in the oven, you get a really nice crackle, and it looks pretty, and it's even. And so again, consistency wins the day. Now these are the ginger nibs that I had from nuts.com, and I always save the bag when I'm all done with the ginger, because the sugar that's in here was, obviously with the ginger pieces, and it's a relatively small grain, so it's not like a big raw sugar or anything like that, but they're very pungent. So I add them, and this is now my ginger molasses sucrose, so I will label it and keep it like this. That way, as I'm baking cookies and when I get ready to do my holiday cookie and confections box, then I can use this, and I don't have to contaminate other sugars, and it just becomes my ginger molasses cookie sugar. So your cookies should be firm. Ideally, you want to bake these from frozen. This was made today, and it's dry and it's kind of firm, but it's going to spread more in the oven than this is my prediction, it's going to spread more in the oven than I would like. And freezing the cookies not only gives you the ability to control your production schedule, but it also gives you that ability to control the spread. That doesn't mean you have to bake it straight from the freezer. It can mean that depending on how soft a cookie is, and these are soft in terms of the molasses and the brown sugar. However, we don't want them to spread too much. And that's also why they don't have sucrose in them. Brown sugar is going to spread less and be less crispy. So that's how this recipe was developed. Other recipes you'll do might have half and half brown sugar and sucrose. You'll get more spread and a little crispier. So if you want to control that, that is an ingredient you can look at. All right, so I'm going to put it into the sugar and roll it around. And you can use a bigger bowl if you want, but this really does work fine. And I like to make sure it's just gotten in the crevices, and then you just sort of tap it off. I think it's really pretty. On top of being delicious and everything, it's a very pretty cookie. So this sugar is going to help create the signature texture. This goes right in the center. I have fiddled around a tiny bit with making them spicier by cracking pepper on top or a little bit of salt. I'm not going to do that with this one, but that is the kind of thing that you can do. And if you have some kind of gingery, peppery thing you want to do, I think that could be really fun and it would look pretty. So I have 2 trays, but I'm only going to put one in the oven to start. The Silpat is going to help with spread. I want this to spread, but I can control the spread. If it's at 350 and it spreads a lot, I am not going to add the second tray. If it doesn't spread much, I'm going to turn the oven down a little bit and add the second tray. When you add a cold second tray, it takes a while for that heat to go through, not only the pan, but through the air gap between the 2 pans, which slows the heat on the bottom, okay? So I'm gonna wrap these guys back up and get them back in the refrigerator. While your cookies are in the refrigerator, they are hydrated. This is a low moisture dough, so it takes time for that moisture to go from the egg, from the molasses, and what else was in there? Well, and the water that's in the butter. That's not easily released, so you have to leave it in the fridge to hydrate. But once you put them in the freezer, they will no longer be hydrating and there won't be moisture migration at the same rate. It's not to say that oftentimes in production, this cookie isn't taken straight from here to the freezer. It can be. But usually that's a big batch. It's been sitting in the bowl for a while and there are other factors that make it okay. Really stable ovens, things like that. But for the home, I would definitely take these from the refrigerator between 24 and 36 hours after you make them into the freezer and bake from frozen if you can. All right, well, I can't carry 3 things, so I'll be right back. It's so funny, I just realized I didn't do a fit check and I don't have an apron on. Oh boy. All right, let's take this in the kitchen. I want to make sure my oven didn't get too hot. I've moved a lot and ovens are temperamental, and that's why I use an oven thermometer. It removes all mystery. I'm not going to store this tray on the oven. It'll get warm. I'm going to keep it over here so it stays cold. Yeah, we're right at 350. There we go. And I set my oven to 345 because I know that is what gets me to 350. So for a timer, I'm going to come back in 8 minutes. That's my routine. It's a system and it helps create consistency. Then I don't have to guess. And I did set a timer. You guys know I often forget the timers. Okay. This is the ginger snap cookie mix that started it all. Back in the day, I went into the Spice House in Milwaukee. And up by the countertop, they had this recipe inside of a bag with all these little things of all the spices I just used and the ginger nibs. And it wasn't cheap. And I remember thinking, you still have to add your own salt and baking powder, but this is what started it. And you have to add all the other stuff. I'll finish my story when we get back. Let's go check this out. This is my baseline. 8 minutes in the oven. Where are we? I'm taking the temperature of the cookie. All right, let's take a look. So it's not spreading a ton and it's getting pretty brown. So what I'm going to do, I'm gonna put it on a double pan and I am going to bring the heat down in the oven. So I got it going, but I don't want the crust to get too hard because then it won't spread. So I'm going to turn this down to 315, which is about 320. But meanwhile, I have to let some heat out. And with my oven thermometer, you can see it doesn't come out easily. So I'm going to do this. Because when you have a lower temperature, you get more spread. When it's hotter, it sets the outside, and once it gets hard, it can't spread anymore. So you want to lower the temperature and let everything spread. So you can see how long I'm doing this, but I am watching my thermometer. It is still at 330, I would say. I'm going to go ahead and close it. Let's do 6 minutes, 7. I'm not taking this as a sign that this cookie doesn't spread. I'm just taking in all the information and thinking about what is causing the result, because it's not about right or wrong. It's about what's happening. And that's why I bake them right out of the bowl and then again after 24 hours and so on and so forth. It just helps me understand what is the best way to approach it when I'm actually making them for people, for myself, for gifts, or if I have a business. It's a beautiful recipe. It was very popular. And if you think about a good recipe appeals to the most number of people. So when you sell a cookie like this, and you would think at a community college, you know, people would think that you want something more in the middle to appeal to everybody. But it turns out people have really good flavor palettes. So not only did students help develop this flavor profile and push it where it is, but it appealed to the most number of people who like a molasses cookie. So it's really good. But back to this. So this packet was there. I bought it. I loved it. Then we leave Milwaukee, and I called to say, can I order some of those? And like, we don't ship them. And you have to come in and get them. And so I had a great friend, who went in and bought them for me and shipped them to me. So then I go to do my research, and sure enough, they have it in this format. So you still have to add butter, molasses, egg, flour, baking soda, baking powder, and have the sugar for rolling. If you're in a hurry, I can recommend this recipe, and you would treat it just like the one I just did. And it makes a really good cookie, so you could actually serve them. Let's go take a look at my cookies. I think, here's my prediction, they aren't going to have spread much, and I think they're going to be more dark than I would like them. I don't like them to get overly baked and hard because they should be soft. Let's take a look. Predictions are one thing, reality and fact is another. Ooh, I like it though. Look at that. It's getting the crackly crust and it's not too dark. Loving it. Perfect. Now I need to bake it kind of through a little bit beyond the crust. So I'm going to do 4 minutes. I know it's annoying because we're going to have to come back. White pepper is used in this. That's where I learned about putting pepper into a molasses ginger cookie. But they use white pepper because the white pepper blends in better. I just like the burn of the fresh ground black pepper. I could do this all day, and I do. All right, let's go check our cookies. I'm getting excited. It's gonna be darn good. I should have made 2. I'm starving. Let's see. Just beautiful. I can't even tell you. All right, so now I need to determine if this is done. And I do that by, it's very soft in the middle. I don't want to go super long. I don't know. If I give it 4 minutes, it should be done. You don't want the top where it's crackling to be shiny. You want that just to be burned off, because when you bake, you want to make sure that that moisture has been released. You want to stop as soon as it is. You don't want to dry it out. But if you don't go all the way, the moisture will get reabsorbed, which is okay with the molasses cookie. All right, we are pulling this. Now I could have even overdone it, and I'll tell you why I think I did. So before, these were a little shiny in the crack. Now it's a little dark there, but it could be okay. Let me turn off the oven. And sometimes you don't know till the next day. Like this needs to, well, I'm probably gonna eat it. But it needs to sit because you need to test it after it's been sitting on the counter. Not only do we test our cookies for how to bake them, how long to bake them, but you definitely want to bake them and then see what their shelf life is like. All right, but let's take a look at this cookie, and then we're gonna let it cool a sec, and then I'll put it on the cooling rack. Hopefully I'll be able to pick it up. I just want to show you how beautiful. I love the edge. I love the thickness. I love the crackle. You can't get that without the sugar. Isn't it beautiful? Absolutely beautiful. And one of the things that's really important when you're developing a cookie for a professional setting is You need a recipe that everybody can make and get the same results. Everybody can bake and get the same results, and that people will like, and that you get good shelf life. This cookie has been made thousands and thousands of times, so it is very good. However, not everybody likes the same spice profile. That's why I'm testing others. And I've already noticed, other than the Spice House recipe, all of the rest, I tasted the dough, it's fine. It's not great though. So yeah, I like a lot of flavor. Well, it's not just aesthetics though. The sugar on the exterior creates a texture. And if you don't have it, you're going to get a very smooth cookie, and it's not going to, those cracks release moisture. So it's an entire process and system that works together. So I don't think you'll get the same texture, because in those cracks are all these holes where, not only the moisture, but the CO2 dispersed. And I think that's very imperative to getting the kind of texture that you want. But it is aesthetically pleasing, that's for sure. I roasted this one to color. It's already changing the way that it looks. It's starting to slump in the center because they start to deflate. All right, I think I can take this. I don't want to move it yet. It's getting there. All right, so I need to see if this is too hot. All right, we'll keep talking, but I'm going to pull this cookie. The ginger molasses. I keep wanting to say molasses because I love molasses. All right, here's the cookie. I'm going to pull it off of the tray. Should be solid. There we go. Woo! That is beautiful. Look at the bottom and the smell. All right, it's very soft. Look at the thickness and the beautiful. This is a spectacular. You can see why the class all agreed this was it. And we all had to agree. It had to be like 90%. We were all on board. Okay. So I'm going to let this cool. It's still like, it'll break. It'll bend. Okay. It'll bend because it's very soft. I'm going to let it sit a second. Then I'm going to taste it. So my recipe for this ginger molasses cookie is for 750 grams. Oh shoot. I didn't count the little guys. If you use a green number 12 Vollrath scoop, you'll get 6 cookies. If you use a 20 quart, this is the original formula. The standard formula is a 20 quart mix. I think we used to get 75 of the gray scoops. But in this middle row is our 750 grams. And I do 750 for a lot of reasons. It's a good size batch, gives you 6 green scoops that I can test. And it's really a workable amount. I'd rather have more cookies in different flavors more often than like big batches I have to work through. It's a good cookie, right? It's a good cookie. Oh, and you can see the nibs. See the nibs? I mean, I love the thickness in the crackle. And I honestly think that these cookies get better after a day. It's like the flavors meld and they sort of settle and almost intensify, actually. Yeah, it's beautiful. This is as dark as I would go on this cookie. It's a perfect color. If I went any darker, it would dry it out more than I like. But maybe someone wants it darker. That's why baking to color is so great. So you can just see what these ingredients do. The glistening, the crackly parts where there was expansion and the release of moisture. All right, let's try this, okay? I know, I love my overalls. It is a perfect cookie. All right, so I'm gonna break it in half because it's very soft. Look at that bend, it's bendable. Ooh, okay. There's a nib, I see a nib. There we go. Look at that. Very moist on the inside. And what we're looking at is the crust. How thick is it? I like that crust. It's kind of maybe hard to see on there, but there's a crust and it's not too dark. And I don't want it too dark on a ginger molasses cookie. And then look at the inside. The inside is you can tell it's soft. I can push on it. But then this part is, there's crunch. Let me pull this off. It's gonna be so good. It's crunchy. So this cookie is the type of cookie, I never take bites out of pastry. I always tear. Tearing a cookie is the way to really allow the cookie to do what it wants to do. And this type of cookie, this is like 6 phases, right? There's the center, just my favorite. And then the top, the sides, the edges, and then the very edge. That's gonna be the crunchiest part. So I'm gonna take a little bit of the center. Very soft. And I just love that you can see the ginger nibs. And it smells good. It smells very good. All right, let's see. It's spicy. I like it. It has a lot of spice. If I'd let it rest, it would have more flavor. That flavor is going to meld and improve and sort of amplify a bit. And you know, right when you eat a cookie out of the oven, you can kind of taste the baking soda. So I can taste the baking soda a tiny bit. It's not a big deal. But all of that to say, that's why you rest cookies. It's why you let time be your friend, because you're going to get a better cookie. That's why when you go to a bakery and you say, oh, that cookie's so good, why can't I get the cookie that good? Because they build in every stage out of respect for the ingredients. And you can too. None of this is out of the reach of the home baker. And you can bake one right out of the bowl. Everyone says, I don't have the patience. Then bake one and put the rest in the fridge. That's what I do. Can you hear the crunch? How many cookies do you get this much softness in the middle and that much crunch on the edge? I mean, like I said, these will stay soft, wrapped well, 3 to 5 days. And they're very spicy. Do you think it's too spicy? I mean, it's spicy. Yeah, it's good ingredients. It's very spicy. My mouth is heated up as if I ate something spicy. So if that's not your thing, you might not like this cookie. You can leave out the spices, keep the ginger, maybe the cinnamon, but I love it. And it's the fresh pepper. That's good. All right. Well, that was an amazing, see? I thought about this cookie all week. I worked so hard to understand it. And even though I know it really well, there's always something to be learned by just slowing down, reading the ingredients, looking at the baker's percentage. So we didn't just take a cookie and change one thing. We fundamentally dialed in each ingredient to get the desired outcome. And when I make the Spice House one, which is a really good comparison, I'll be able to apples look at is which one's thicker, which one spread more, which one has better flavor, which one crackled more, which one was sweeter or softer. Apples to apples, and it is really fun. It's all, for me, it's I like the baking and the eating and everything, but I like the analysis. That's my thing. But I'm gonna eat this cookie. I'm gonna eat this cookie tonight. You know, I could save it for the morning with my tea. It's good. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and thank you for coming. Without you, this would not be possible, and I thoroughly enjoy doing any recipe you guys want me to do and being here. It's a privilege and a joy, honestly. So take care. Have a good night. I'll see you next time. Oh, there it is.